Hi, I'm Sailor St. Clair. I am the co-artistic director of Novelties Theatre, and I am here tonight with Mandy Flame, who is joining us for this episode of Ekphrasis. Mandy is a performer, producer, photographer, and prop maker. I believe you told me you were just peeing all over Seattle, and I think you meant that with the most amount of love and respect for this city.
Absolutely. I tried to find things that began with a letter P, and I just stuck to them. So
it's always good when you stick with the P, Mandy. I feel like that's a good way to go into this evening, because Mandy is presenting a piece to us tonight inspired by a great writer who has an equal love of wordplay to Mandy's love of wordplay. Mandy, you've brought us a piece that is inspired by Shakespeare's Hamlet, right?
That's correct, yes.
So I wanted to ask you first of all, why did you choose this play? What are some of the things about the play that resonate with you or inspire you?
Well, to take on the whole of Hamlet and reduce it to a 6-minute burlesque piece is a little challenging. So I really focused on the soliloquy. And what inspired me was the fundamental question, to be or not to be. I, like many transgender people, struggled with suicide. It was a consummation greatly to be desired at one point. And then, just as Hamlet is kind of working through this, I also worked through it. And in fact, that was the basis of a previous piece of work that I put together entitled, Can You See the Real Me? And it was my son's actual suicide attempt that really drove me forward to transition and become who I am today. And what really attracted me to the Hamlet soliloquy is I had been through that thought process, to be or not to be. And I had made the choice. I had made the choice to be, so I could use this as a springboard to tell the next chapter in my story.
Thank you for sharing that, Mandy. I really love the first few lines of the piece because you're playing so closely on Shakespeare's language, and I think you do it in a really, really powerful way.
Thank you.
I also love the line where you say you are becoming, and then you are, in fact, gesturing to how becoming you indeed are.
I hope American audiences get that use of the word becoming.
Well, we've explained it to them, so I hope they get it now.
I read a lot of Austen and Shakespeare and the old writers, and to be becoming is to be beautiful or pretty. So a very becoming young lady is somebody who's easy on the eye. I think the American expression is.
Yeah, easy on the eye. Indeed. Indeed you are. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about how you approached translating this soliloquy into the piece that you performed for us. Can you tell us a little bit about your process?
Yes, and actually I was guided in this because this was a piece I wrote when I was studying playwriting at Seattle College. And we were taught to start a piece by thinking of an instigating moment. What is it that triggers the action? What starts the snowball going down the hill? And there has to be a reason why the play is taking place at this particular time, at this particular moment. And I just love the idea of hitting the audience with something that they are so familiar with. To be or not to be, that is the question. And then immediately taking them on an unexpected track. I answered that question. I chose to be. And then the audience is like, okay, where are we going now? But because I've hit them with that line, they're kind of buckled in for the ride, and I'm now can take them down a different narrative path. So that was my process to get into the piece. And I knew I wanted to talk about what happens after transition. Because the and I wrote this back in 2013, so it's almost 10 years now. 10 years, and you've got to acknowledge how fast transgender studies and knowledge of transgender people has kind of hit the media and snowballed. Was virtually non-existent 20 years ago. Anyway, even now, a lot of the dialogue about being transgender is about, well, how did you know, and how do you go about transitioning? And they want to ask about bathrooms and body parts and surgeries and hormones. And I'd already got past that. And I really wanted a piece that started to talk about, well, what is a transgender person's life like after the event of transition? And in particular, I wanted to talk about how transgender people are accepted by cis males in a dating environment. And, you know, very much like the old joke about, I have nothing against lesbians, but I don't want my daughter to marry one. Mm-hmm. You know, most cis men will say, okay, as long as she keeps to herself, that's fine, but I don't want to date her. Or if I do want to date her, I don't want my friends to know that I want to date her. There's a lot of questionable stuff there. Mm-hmm. So my process was, I really wanted to focus on the what's next. What are the implications of having transitioned and trying to live the life of a transitioned person?
I think you play so much with a lot of the language that Shakespeare uses throughout this place to kind of help you pose, throughout this piece, to help you pose some of those questions, which is really, really clever, because the context of the soliloquy, as you alluded to, is Hamlet trying to figure out whether or not he wishes to still be, right? Like to be alive. And you push that to a place that goes beyond that inquiry to think about what is the decision to live, but you're using Shakespeare's own language in a way that's like really cleverly reframed, which I really appreciate.
Well,
and
thank you.
I think works quite well. And I wanted to ask maybe if you would speak a little bit more about how you think this piece amplifies some of those themes in Hamlet, right? Since you are framing it with this context of the question of being alive.
Hamlet obviously is a very complicated and complex piece. But one of the things I take away from it is Hamlet really struggling to find his own personality and how he wants to be. He's got this serious pressure from his uncle, stepdad to conform. He's got this pressure from Ophelia. He's got this pressure from everywhere. And it's driving him mad. And very much the same is true of a transgender person. If they are following what society expects them to be male, expects them to behave in certain ways, it can drive them mad. And so it was just natural for me to go down here and amplify that. Oh, there's all these choices, all these questions. What if I challenge society's expectations? So that's really the core theme. Mm-hmm. Having chosen to be, now what are the implications, and how does society view me now? So we talked first about, my company that I was, lauded and a great employee for 30 years, almost immediately managed me out of the door. And then we talk about, we get into the dating and the traps and problems dating as a transgender woman.
There's something interesting to me about the moment you're describing for the character of trying to figure out how to be, and how that really is aligned with the fact that Hamlet's a young person and a student, right? But so much of your piece too is also about where you sit in the world, kind of on the opposite end of that. Uh-huh. And I wonder is there a connection for you between the idea of his youth and transition as a kind of youthfulness in a way, or?
Honestly, I wasn't deliberately doing that. I did want to make the piece more generally applicable, by talking of the problems of not just dating as a transgender woman, but dating as a woman of age, because I'm in that intersection. And a lot of cis women of my age are also fearful of dating for the same reasons. Will they get used? Will they get abused? And so I wanted to make the piece connectable by focusing on that women of a certain age, as well as transgender women. In fact, an early draft of this, I didn't mention the fact I was trans at all. I wrote it entirely with that as a subtext, and I wrote it just about people of age. Didn't work so well, actually. I'm bringing the transgender up a couple of notches so that it's visible. I think makes it a stronger piece.
I think it's a really lovely piece, and I'm so happy that you're about to share this with everyone here today. But before we get to take a look at it, I have one more question for you. This is a very important, highly literary, highly theoretical question. If you were to pair a food or a beverage with William Shakespeare's Hamlet, what would it be or not be?
Well, I don't know what I would pair with Hamlet, but suggested beverage for my monologue would be a nice bottle of red wine, a Merlot, and I propose my favorite vintner, Mark Ryan, who has a bottle called Long Haul. And long haul for me is appropriate because transgender people are in this for the long haul. They're not just after their 15 minutes of fame. This is our lives, and we intend to live them to the full. The fact that it's a Merlot is also important to me because of the famous "I love the wine, not the label" speech from Schitt's Creek, where David is explaining that he really is a pansexual. And this was a milestone in media history where, an acceptable way of explaining pansexuality to a mass audience. And I love it, and I even have the t-shirt saying the wine is the label. I like the wine, not the label. But transgender people got dismissed a little there because he says, and I also used to date a Merlot who used to be a Chardonnay, but it got complicated. So that's saying that even in a show which dares put a pansexual person and shows a gay relationship and a gay marriage, they still just, okay, we'll touch on transgender, but we'll back away from it. It gets complicated. I think we're still waiting for the "I like the wine, not the label" to be produced in relationship to a person loving a transgender woman.
Which is exactly what your monologue speaks to. So, Mandy, thank you so much for being with us here tonight, and let's hear you out.
Thank you very much, Sailor. Been a pleasure. To be or not to be, that is the question. No. I answered that question. I chose to be and to become. And I became, and I am becoming. To be is answered. What's next is the question. Where do heroes go when they ride off into the sunset? What sustains their lives then? The stories never tell. Not that I'm anybody's hero. My transition put paid to any chance of that. I had my 15 minutes of fame, but then, after 30 years, with the same company, the management no longer have confidence. It's time for you to go. And that was it. Hardly the happy ending I'd hoped for. No gold watch, not even a cake or a gathering to say, "Well done, we're proud of you." Just clear your desk before you go. They probably couldn't figure out which bathroom I was supposed to use. What do I want from my happily ever after? If there's one thing I've learned, it's that my happiness is up to me. No relying on someone else to make me happy. Someone else. To date, or not to date. Maybe that's the question. Why would I date? I don't like for friends or pastimes. It's very satisfying to be the mistress of my own domain, independent, free-spirited. It's hard to be a woman of a certain age, putting ourselves online, on the line, laid out like fresh meat on a butcher's block of a dating site. Many choose not, but they have memories of earlier loves, solace in their sheltered years, where I am rapidly becoming a crone, and never maiden or mother. Shall my fruit wither on the vine, never having been plucked? It would seem a shame to have come so far, never to take the next step. What man would I want? Some friends with benefits? Hire somebody as an exotic house pet? Do I still believe in true love's kiss? I'm too old to be kissing frogs, and far too inexperienced to advertise. Perchance to date, aye, therein lies the rub. For in that online frenzy, what manner of man may come must give me pause. I fear a thrill seeker, someone out to say that they banged a tranny. I fear a gold digger, someone out to take me for what they can get. I fear, most of all, growing old alone.
Thanks for watching Ekphrasis, a production of Novelties Theatre. If you enjoyed this episode, we invite you to make a tax-deductible donation through the link in the video description. And don't forget to like and subscribe below so you don't miss our next episode featuring Miss Elaine Yes and the Canterbury Tales.